Can 10 people change a nation? How about one person? Well, today we're going to learn about one man in England who did just that. He transformed a nation by walking with 10 other individuals. Stay tuned. How do I bring my faith to work? How do I tap into the power of God in my work-life call? Why am I going through this adversity? Is God mad at me? I'm Os Hillman, and I've been helping leaders like you answer these questions and more for over 30 years. That's what this podcast is all about. Let's learn and grow together. Welcome to TGIF, Today God is First. Hey guys, welcome to this week's TGIF at Work podcast. This week we're going to talk about a subject that I love talking about, and that is the life of William Wilberforce. Wilberforce was a man who was born in England into aristocracy, and he was living the life, and then God interrupted his life, and it turned out to be quite a life he lived. He had an incredible impact on the nation of England, and he and 10 other individuals literally transformed the nation. And so it is a great lesson for us today, so let's get started. For such a time as this, William Wilberforce, Lessons for Today's Culture Shapers. William Wilberforce was born into aristocracy in 1759 in London, England. He was only 5 feet tall, but he was very educated and a great orator and great debater as he entered the life of politics later in his life. He was best friend of William Pitt, the youngest Prime Minister of England. At age 24, he was the youngest to ever be Prime Minister of England. Later in his life, when he became 28 years old, just before that time, he began to really investigate spiritual things in his life. His uncle and aunt had a great deal to do with that, and then he also searched out a man named Milner, who played a key role in his spiritual journey, and he ended up coming to Christ when he was 28 years old. And so after he came to Christ, he began to grow in his faith, and he thought, well, if I'm this sold out for God, I must be supposed to be a pastor or a priest. And he struggled with that decision, and he decided to go see a man that he had heard about and had had great influence in the nation, a guy named John Newton. John Newton was a former slave owner, and Newton was also a man who would ultimately write Amazing Grace, the famous hymn that everybody knows today. And so he consulted with him, and it was an interesting conversation, because what Newton said to him was, no, you are called to politics. Who knows that you are called to such a time as this? Those words were very difficult for him, and he wrestled with them and prayed and realized that Newton was right, that God had given him the ability to persuade, the ability to debate, and has given him a stature in life that would allow him to have great influence and use his influence for good. He was part of a community, though, called the Clapham Sect. The Clapham Sect was about 10 individuals, and they were also, from aristocracy, and many of them were major influencers. They lived in the same town of Clapham, England. They built solid, caring friendships and through business and personal interest. They all had a common passion for social issues, and they leveraged their individual time, talent, and resources to effect change in England. They did not sacrifice their individual calling, but they leveraged it for greater purpose by combining it with others. They ultimately modeled one mission, separate callings, and many alliances. And so these 10 made up of people like a playwright, landowners, craftsmen, lawyers, an economist, an artist, and many of them were philanthropists who used their money and resource to affect change. And of course, Wilberforce was the politician in the group. And so as you look at this slide here, you see a coin that was created by an artisan. Am I not a man and a brother? It was to promote the abolitionist movement, and that was one of the key causes that Wilberforce invested his life in. And it took over 20 years, but they abolished slavery and the practice of slavery and the business of slavery years later. And he created a book that talked about the reformation of manners and morals. That's an interesting way of putting it, but the book was about, having integrity and righteousness in doing business in England, which, there was a lot of really bad stuff going on in England at that time. Ultimately, they would have 69 world-changing initiatives in social justice and other areas. And so Wilberforce is a great example of what God can do with a one man and other people. What it also tells you is it only takes a small percentage of people to actually affect a nation. Here we find 10 people who affected the nation, abolished slavery, because they had a passion, they worked together, they used PR, they used all the skills of the various members of the Clapham Sect. And they were people that walked together, encouraged each other, lived together in the same community, went to the same church, and they lived and breathed the vision that God had placed on their heart. And so this is a very simple teaching, but I wanted to bring this to you to let you know that, God has people in the world that can be great influencers, and you don't have to have a lot of them working together to make an impact. I hope that was helpful to you. Years ago, I decided we needed a Clapham group in America. We needed to raise up men and women who walked together, who had a vision for transforming our nation. And that's how I created the Change Agent Master Mentor Program. It's a group of leaders that come together to learn together, to walk together, and to discover how we could be change agents in America and beyond. And so if you're not part of that, I would encourage you to join us. It's only $19 a month, and you have over 55 courses, over 140 classes, 55 case study videos, and 250 leader interviews. And twice a month we get together on a live Zoom call. So I'd love to have you part of that so that we can be part of your journey to fulfill the larger story of your life. So take a look at this short video that explains the Change Agent Master Mentor Program. God bless, and I hope to see you online. Take care.